The air inside the Great Galactic Council chamber was thick with tension. Hundreds of alien dignitaries occupied their respective podiums, their holographic nameplates shimmering above them in a dozen languages. The circular chamber was a cathedral of diplomacy, a place where wars had been avoided, but just as often, sanctioned. At the center stood Elias Reigns, the solitary representative of humanity. His sharp black suit was a striking contrast to the ceremonial robes and exoskeletal armors surrounding him. With nonchalant precision, he adjusted his cuffs as if the fate of his entire species wasn't currently on trial. On the other side of the chamber loomed Overlord Zelter, a reptilian behemoth clad in obsidian combat armor. His golden eyes blazed with barely contained fury as he addressed the assembly. "The Terran Confederation," Zelter hissed, his voice a deep, guttural sneer, "has failed to comply with the Galactic Trade Accord. This defiance cannot stand. We must act before their insolence spreads like a disease." Whispers spread around the chamber, some approving, others hesitant. The V-Dominion, known for its relentless militarism, had been searching for an excuse to strike at humanity for years. Today, it seemed they had found one. Elias breathed in slowly, stepping forward. His voice was calm, measured. "With all due respect, Overlord Zelter, let's not pretend this is about trade regulations." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "The V-Dominion has violated more council laws than any species here, yet curiously, no one calls for war against you." Zelter's scaled lip curled. "Do not compare our empire to your frail race, human. We established our legacy through strength, not gaps and deception." Elias tilted his head slightly. So it is about strength then, not trade?" He gave a small nod. "Good. Just wanted to clear that up before we proceed." The chamber stirred. A few delegates exchanged knowing glances. Zelter had stepped right into that one. The Overlord clenched his jaw. "Your kind is reckless, a threat to the balance of power in this galaxy. If we allow your defiance, others will follow. That is why the Terran Confederation must submit, or be eradicated." Silence. Elias let the words hang in the air before sighing. "You know," he mused, "every time I step into this chamber, someone is threatening to wipe out humanity. It's almost sentimental at this point." A few chuckles came from the more neutral species. Zelter's nostrils flared. "You think this is funny, human?" "No," Elias responded, his expression hardening. "I think it's predictable." He took a step closer. "Let me run through the pattern, shall we? Every time an empire underestimates humanity, they make a lot of threats, they gather their ships, they invade." He smirked. "And then somehow, they end up regretting it." Elias gestured toward the central holographic display. A timeline appeared, detailing past conflicts. The Solaris Empire crushed the Ali clans, diminished to half their former strength. The Dominion should ask itself one simple question. He looked directly at Zelter. Why is it that every species that attempts to rule humanity ends up losing more than they bargained for? The murmuring in the chamber grew louder. Even species with no love for humanity were nodding in reluctant agreement. Zelter's claws flexed against the metal railing. "This council cannot disregard the threat you pose," he snapped. "You refuse to adhere to the galactic order, you expand without respect for treaties, and worst of all, you fight like rabid creatures." Elias smirked. "Rabid animals?" "No." His voice was quiet. "We fight like people who don't intend to lose." Zelter slammed his fist against the table, the impact reverberating through the chamber. "I suggest an immediate vote." His voice thundered. "The Terran Confederation must either be brought to heel or face the full force of the Council's might." Several species nodded, others hesitated. Elias turned slowly, scanning the chamber. He let his gaze linger just long enough to remind certain delegates of certain painful truths. Finally, he spoke. "I won't waste your time with flowery speeches." His tone was firm. "I'll just say this. The V-Dominion believes war with humanity is inevitable, a simple thing." He took another stride forward, lowering his voice. "But before you vote, ask yourselves one question." His gaze locked onto Zelter. If the Dominion is so sure of victory, why do they look so nervous? Silence. Zelta's fists remained clenched. His breathing was controlled but tight. The chamber was shifting. The tide was turning. Elias folded his arms and waited. A charged hush hovered over the Galactic Council. The weight of Elias Rain's words lingered in the air. Zelta's claws trembled against the railing. His reptilian face remained an unreadable mask of rage, but the council, once tilting in his favor, now sat in ambiguity. The momentum had shifted, and Elias knew it. He took a long breath, letting the stillness stretch just enough to make the other representatives uncomfortable. They weren't just considering the cost of war, they were considering the cost of losing. A gentle chime echoed through the chamber. The presiding speaker, an ancient translucent entity known as Varus 9, finally addressed the room. This matter, Varus 9 intoned, its voice ringing like a distant chime, is of grave importance. Before this council proceeds, we require clarity. The being turned its crystalline eyes toward Elias. Ambassador Rains, you claim war with humanity would be ill-advised. Do you care to elaborate? Elias nodded, stepping forward with measured confidence. Of course, Speaker. His gaze swept across the assembled representatives. You all know the V-Dominion as a war-hardened empire, ruthless, competent conquerors of a dozen worlds. They imagine themselves as the galaxy's apex predators. He let the word settle. But has anyone here stopped to consider? He paused. That maybe, just maybe, they're not at the top of the food chain. Zelta inhaled sharply, a low growl rumbling in his throat. We have triumphed over species older and stronger than yours, human. Do not mistake luck for strength. Elias arched an eyebrow. Luck? He chuckled. That's what the Paris Empire called it right before they collapsed. With a flick of his fingers, Elias activated the holographic display once more. A timeline appeared, depicting every war humanity had faced since first stepping onto the galactic stage. But this wasn't just a list of battles, it was a pattern. Elias gestured toward the first entry. The Ali clans thought they could raid human colonies with impunity. That lasted 6 months. Now they've spent the last 30 years paying us restitution. He swiped to the next event. The Solaris Empire declared war when we refused to abandon our frontier worlds. Their fleet was 10 times the size of ours. Didn't matter. 2 years later, their homeworld was under siege. They surrendered unconditionally. The room grew quieter with every slide. Elias turned back to Zelta. Every species that has waged war on humanity has ended up crippled, dissolved, or worse. He stepped forward once more. The Dominion is strong, sure. But the real question isn't whether you can beat us. His voice dropped. It's whether you can afford to find out. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Zelta's claws tightened. Your threats mean nothing, he snarled. Humanity has never confronted an empire like ours. Elias sighed, shaking his head. That's what they all thought too. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. And yet here we are. Elias exhaled, his tone losing its piercing sharpness, but remaining restrained. At first, we aspired to target the Dominion's supply lines, undermine their fleet cooperation, minimize unnecessary casualties. He allowed that to sit for a moment before adding. But if you push us to struggle for our survival, then we shall ensure that the Dominion never threatens anyone again. The weight of his words settled over the chamber like a decisive conclusion. For the first time, Zelta looked to the other council members. He needed their backing, but suddenly he saw doubt, hesitancy. The tide had shifted. Elias folded his arms. So, Overlord, do you still believe this war is a good idea? Zelta said nothing, and in that quiet, Elias had already won. The chamber stayed silent. Overlord Zelta's normal air of dominance had broken, revealing the first signs of uncertainty. His bright eyes darted across the assembled delegates, hoping for support. The war he had been so assured of only minutes earlier now felt significantly less inevitable. Elias Rains waited, his expression deliberately neutral, but his intuition sharp. He had seen this moment before, the exact moment an opponent understood they had miscalculated. The presiding speaker, Varus 9, shattered the hush. "It appears we have reached an impasse," the crystalline entity claimed. "A battle of this scale would not only impact humans and the V-Dominion, but would ripple throughout the full council. Before we proceed, we must hear the voices of other representatives." A flickering blue light expressed a wish to speak from a podium near the left. Ambassador Th of the V Collective, an insected being with sparkling split limbs, leaned forward. "The Vorth Collective has had contact with humanity before," Th said, his mandibles clicking. "They do not seek war without purpose. If history has revealed anything, it is that those who move against them do not arise unscathed." Another chime. A strong-set, fur-covered person from the Gaia Imperial spoke next. "The Imperium will not support a conflict of this level," growled Ambassador Carr, his deep voice reverberating through the chamber. "Conflict with mankind is not a strategic approach. It is a gamble, and we do not wager our ships on unclear outcomes." Elias watched.